It is so, so nice to see all of your faces. Some are new, some I've seen quite recently. Sarah, good to see you here. Uh, I'm just so grateful. I was talking to Kelsey, who is our VP of Community Engagement, and just really grateful. She's waving to you all. Really grateful for this community. I woke up thinking about you all in the middle of the night last night and how excited I was to have this conversation. Um, so for those of you who are new, I'm Katie Martin. I am the author of Evolving Education and the Chief Impact Officer at the Learner Centered Collaborative. We are a national nonprofit that is really committed to creating the conditions and shifting to learner-centered practices in schools across the country. So thank you for being here. I know that this community is vast. You are from all parts of the country and world. You have different roles in education. Some people have been doing this work for years and are on this journey and are experts that I look to, and some are just dabbling and kind of curious about what this all means. So I want to assure you, wherever you are on this journey, that you belong here, and this is the place for you. We're going to be sharing some stories. I'll be talking about some of the major themes in the first part of the book tonight, and we're going to be getting some Q&A for sure. Like if you have questions or comments, please use the chat. I love to see what's resonating and what questions you all have. This is for you. So I want to make sure that I'm answering your questions. But over the next 3 weeks, we're going to be diving into the 3 parts of evolving education. Tonight, what are our aspirations for learners? Really the part 1 of the book. Next week, we're going to be talking about how we might create the most meaningful learning experiences, which is part 2 of the book. And our third week, how might we create the conditions to shift to a learner-centered paradigm? And that's going to be the part 3 of the book. So tonight, our flow is going to be, I'm going to do a little bit of an overview. I'm going to share some behind the scenes and some of the stories that really have been resonating with me since I wrote the book. I'm going to ask for the Q&A, like I mentioned, and then we're going to go into small groups for you to just have a chance to connect. I know that the best part of this work is connecting with others. And if you get my bright spots, the one I sent out today was about the community, right? October is a hard time. We're changing, you've been in school for a couple months now, and sometimes we're tired and we're worn out, and coming together, learning together, and just being in community can bring us that sense of wholeheartedness. So that is my goal for all of you this evening. So let's dive in. Kelsey is going to be kind of monitoring the chat and interrupting if there's questions, but I invite you to share them. And I just want to start a little bit of a background of like where this book came from, and give you a little kind of insights in why I wrote Evolving Education. So almost 5 years ago, I was telling my family last night, I published Learner-Centered Innovation. And that was really about the why we need to shift schools, what's possible, and kind of more of a vision of the future of education. And that resonated, but I feel like over the last 5 years, the why is we're pretty aligned on the why, right? Why we're doing this work. People are kind of like, yes, we know it matters. But I kept getting but how? Katie, what does it look like? I want to see pictures. I want to see examples. I want to know what other people are doing. And some of that is just validation to know, oh my gosh, am I on the right track? Am I doing things that other educators are doing around the country? And so that was one of the main focuses. I wanted to capture the practices that are really making a difference for learners and are really bringing joy to the educators, to validate what is actually working in many classrooms and schools and communities. I also wanted to push people's thinking to say, we don't get out of our classrooms and schools enough, I want to show you what's happening in other places so you can think about that. And models, I think, are so powerful because once we see something, we often say, I could do that. I could even do it better, which is great. That's why I want those models. I want you to be able to build on things and bring them back to your community. And ultimately inspire communities of educators to come together and think about, how do we do this differently? What does our community need? What do our students need? And how do we really think about changing practices that best meet the needs of our learners? So that was the plan. In January of 2020, I talked to George Couros. I said, I'm writing the book, write number 2. And he said, can't wait. Send me your chapters when you're done. And then I started writing. So I got in my morning routine. I started getting up at 5 o'clock. I started writing. I was so excited. And then, as you all know, March of 2020 hit. And I was like, this doesn't fit anymore. Nothing makes sense at all anymore. I just need to pause. The long-term vision, everything was so short-term. And so I put the book aside. It stayed stuck in my Google Drive for probably 8 months. And probably around August or September, I started thinking about, the time is now, because if we don't start changing practices now, coming out of the pandemic, we are going to miss this incredible opportunity to really change what's happening in our schools. While there's so much challenge, there was that great opportunity to think about that. So I started writing again, and I finished the draft in December of 2020. And the book came out finally in August, right as everybody was going back to school in what we thought was going to be a really back to normal year, right? And what we know is that turned out to be one of the most challenging years, even more so than 2020. So it was harder for educators to say, yeah, I really want to jump in and do something new when we are in survival mode. So that's why we've started to do some book clubs now, because as I've heard more and more, people are feeling more energized this year, coming back, starting to feel like we can focus on learning, not so much COVID protocols. So I'm grateful. All that to say, that is kind of the background of the book, and it finally came out in August. And it's been really fun to see the connections that people have been making, and just the resurgence of the urgency to do this work. So I thought that I would start by reading apart from the introduction. I was going back and reminding myself. So I'm going to read a section on page 2 about why I wrote this and really what it means to move from school-centered to learner-centered. When we look at learners, we can see what's working and what's challenging, and ultimately, we can start to envision what's possible. Evolution in education is about using insight from our own experiences, research from the field, and new tools and approaches to adapt our best practices to meet the needs of learners where they are. As many of you know, I have 2 children, Abby and Zach, who are both unique individuals with their own strengths, challenges, and goals. What matters most to me as a mom is that my children know that they matter for who they are and who they are becoming. I want them to know how to learn when no one is telling them what to do, how to fight for something that matters to them, and how to communicate their ideas, feelings, and dreams. I want them to have the skills to work with others in diverse and complex situations to solve problems that matter to them and others. I want this for all of us. And that's what learner-centered education comes in. This shift begins with an awareness that if we truly want to develop knowledge, skills, and habits in students, we have to love them, help them see the full beauty of who they are and what they can become. So that is from the introduction. That is really kind of where my heart is, and I think why this work matters so much. So as you see, I was going to take the screen down, but if you see the part 1, these are the shifts that really are part of the first part of the book. So take a minute, and I just would love to hear from you all in the chat, which one of these shifts resonates the most with you? Where is your energy around teaching to the average and managing expectations versus shifting to variability as the norm? Is it about relationships? Is it about our beliefs in students or how we define success? And I'm looking at some questions. Success, great. Hi, Kim. Cool. I'm going to touch on a little bit of each of them. Relationships. Yes, Shauna. So before I touch, yes, relationships. I love it, Beth, as an assessment coordinator, but I try to remind my teachers that they need to look beyond those scores. Awesome. So I'm going to share an example, and I'm curious what you would say. So I'm going to answer this question from Marie Louise Lawrence. How can we truly have student-centered learning if we are subjected to standardized tests? Great question. And so what I want to say to that is often people say like learner-centered education, it's a free-for-all, right? You just do whatever the kids want, they have choice. And teachers will say, well, then I can't tell them what to do if it's learner-centered. And so I want to back that up and just clarify that we all have goals and accountability, right? In our organizations, work, life, and in school, there are things that we are responsible for teaching young people. There are clear goals and outcomes that we want. So it's irresponsible to say we just ignore those, right? Structure is really critical to effective learning and growth. So what I've seen in research and in practice is that when we create environments that are aligned to the learning sciences, that are aligned to the research, we can meet those goals of standardized testing. But I believe that is a very low bar. And you're probably going to say to me, Katie, that's not really helpful because we're not even meeting that low bar. But I believe the reason we are not meeting that low bar is because kids are very disengaged. I share the graph all the time of engagement that is down to 20 and 30% by the time kids graduate high school. From 5th grade to 12th grade, the longer they're in school, the more disengaged they become. And if we don't even have kids engaged, motivated with us, then how are we expecting them to understand, memorize the facts that we're asking them to regurgitate on a test? Right? So a learner-centered paradigm where we're creating authentic and meaningful experiences because we know young people is not asking you to ignore basic skills and foundation and standardized tests. It's asking you to go above and beyond in a way that that students are doing work that matters. There's authenticity and purpose so that they want to develop those skills. They have the purpose to learn and grow. And then when they go and take a test, they know it doesn't define them, but they're able to demonstrate what they know and can do. And there's authentic feedback and growth based on where they are. So yeah, they're not in charge of their own education, and that's why they're disengaged. But a lot of the standards that we're being asked to teach are not bad. It's often the curriculum and the way that we choose to teach them. Right? Asking kids to make inferences, synthesize ideas, understand cause and effect. Those are not bad things. But if you put it in a very boring worksheet and you ask them to, tag A to B, or you ask them to fill in a blank, that's not really going deep and using those skills. It's much low level practice and application of those. Heck yeah, Marie, let's let learners co-create, co-design, right? I share this all the time. Devin Vadichka, our CEO, brilliant, says, you can hold me accountable for the process, or you can hold me accountable for the outcome, but you can't do both. And the way I see that in our classrooms is if we have really clear outcomes, we make it clear to our parents and students and everyone what we're trying to accomplish, then we can allow for people to navigate that path in a way that makes sense to them with a variety of resources and supports and feedback. but we hold them accountable to the end result. If we hold people accountable day by day by day, you will turn this in on this day, you will be on page 72, you will take this test. The outcome is out of their hands, right? Because we have managed the process so carefully that we know from, years of experience that it's not going to meet everybody. It's going to meet about a third of the kids in the class. We're teaching to the mythical middle, not necessarily helping everyone get to that goal. So I love, love, love that question. And I think it is at the heart of this mindset shift. So when I really think about the first shift in here in the book, getting to know your learners and then helping them know themselves, this is really at the core of teaching to the average, right? The mythical average that meets no one, to really understanding that there's variability in all of our classrooms. And the more that we embrace that, the more we can leverage those as skills and assets and be able to build on those and help learners build on them, right? Like we all on this call probably have very different strengths and interests and goals. And if we expected everyone to do the same thing at the same time, we would miss out on that. So this is one of my favorite ways to frame it or think about it is, what if we instead thought about young people, not needing young people to adapt to a standardized system, but instead having a system that adapts to them, right? If you've read the first chapter, you know that I talk a lot about Zach and his experience and the impact that teachers had on him. Two different mindsets, same standards, same resources, same four-wall classroom, right? But two different mindsets of the teacher. One teacher believed that kids had to do worksheets day in and day out. They had to be at the same place at the same time. And he was getting scolded and for not being at the same place. And there was this transactional relationship of learning. In another environment where he says, "Mom, do you know I'm smart?" Like, "Yeah, buddy, right? I know you're smart." He said, "Miss Hassey asked us how to solve a problem. She let me use my own strategies. Instead of doing, 40 problems in a worksheet, we did a couple problems and we shared our strategies and she shared it with the class." That doesn't take new curriculum. That doesn't take a lot of new classroom. It's not a new curriculum. It is really about a mindset, knowing learners, seeing them and being able to let them solve some problems, use their strategies and guide them from where they are. So a lot of times people will say, "I can't personalize for all my kids." And I couldn't agree more. We as educators cannot personalize for each and every student. It is totally unsustainable for me to stay home and write an IEP for every student and grab resources for my 20 kids or 200 kids. It is not until they become part of the process and we allow learners to co-design, to take ownership, and to navigate their path that it can truly be personalized. And so I think that's where we're caught, is people are overwhelmed thinking that I have to move from a standardized system where I do the same thing for everyone to a personalized system where I create a different plan for everybody else, when really it's just inviting them to be part of the journey and take some of that ownership. And of course, respecting the learners, absolutely. So when we think about getting to know learners, we can't personalize or we can't create these opportunities if we don't really know who they are and we don't invite them to be part of their classroom for their strengths, their interests, and also the challenges that they bring to the table. So knowing them and then connecting with them, I think is absolutely a critical component. I'm looking for my notes of what I wanted to make sure to share with you there. I will, before we go on to chapter 2, I do want to just read a part from the last section on 21. And it says, "I am incredibly grateful for the teachers who have helped both of our kids love school, feel more confident, and develop the skills and mindsets they need to thrive. The impact of a teacher who sees their students as individuals, who gets to know them and cultivate their curiosity and creativity while developing academic skills is invaluable. And that's the core of that question, right? It's not either or, it's both. When we focus on learners and connect to their interests, needs, and goals, we can create experiences that ignite curiosity, develop passion, and unleash genius. As Zach and so many young people experience benefits from teachers, it is clear that it is not the programs or the resources that make the difference in the lives of students. It's teachers who look to their learners and evolve their teaching methods in pursuit of providing optimal learning experiences to meet their needs. This starts with the belief that all of us have genius and talents worth cultivating, and the desire to create models of learning that provide opportunities to do so. And I think that is one of the most important parts to me. It's the belief that every person in our classroom, in our community, has value. You know, I so often am like, I'm always in the parent lens, right? Like Abby and Zach are now 12 and 13. And I see the difference, frankly, when they know that a teacher cares about them, when they feel like they are just taking up space in a room. It's a very different orientation than when they walk in and feel like someone knows them and cares about them. And so this second chapter, really connecting with learners, is a really core concept. So often we've been like, oh, relationships and social emotional learning, we have that once a month, or that's an add-on, or if I get to it, those are the 5 minutes at the end of the period. Instead, if we reverse that and understand these connections are foundational to building effective learning communities, we have to think about, how do we start the school year building those communities with our students, but also building the connections among the students together. Then we can see things differently and see the power of the relationships to enhance the learning. So if you've read chapter 2, I highlighted this story from Sheena, a new teacher. So I have never had someone guest blog for me, but one of my best friends, Steph Bulow, is a professor at the University of Hawaii. And she said, one of my students just wrote this amazing blog, and I want to have an authentic audience for her to share it to. And she said, do you think you could put it on your blog? And I thought, yeah, I'll give it a shot. I'll read it. So she sent this story, and I just loved it and thought it was so powerful. But she was talking about how in her teacher preparation program, she was taught to assert dominance, right? She was taught that, like, you're a young woman, you have to come in, don't smile till Christmas, you have to make sure that you're authority. And so she did that. And she came in joyful. I'm going to love teaching. I'm going to do all these things with kids. And then she met the kids, right? And, you have your best plans, but she wasn't connecting with the students. In fact, she was asserting her authority, and they were in a power struggle. And so that power struggle never allowed them to develop the relationship. And therefore, they weren't really in a productive learning environment. So instead of actually learning and doing the fun things she aspired to as a teacher, she was constantly nagging at him to sit down, follow directions, do your math homework. Until one day, they had an opportunity to connect, and he asked for help, and she kind of thought, I don't want to help him. He's not always been that helpful to me, and ended up helping him, and it totally turned their relationship around. And so when we think about classrooms that are focused on control and compliance, we get a power struggle. We get people who are just, and this is the same for all of us in our relationships. I think if you're trying to be in control, it's not going to be authentic. It's not going to be that meaningful connection. It's going to be, at the risk of creating those connections. And so when we think about establishing our classroom norms and relationships, I think it's important to think about how we are creating that community, how learners are having roles and responsibilities. So some of the strategies that I love in this chapter that I've used forever: classroom jobs, right? Having students take ownership in the classroom and have responsibilities, being able to have one-on-one check-ins. How are you doing? What's going on? Stand at the door, say hi. If students don't know that you care about them and see them, they're just going through the motions, and it's not fruitful for any of us. It's a generalization, of course, but it is much harder if we don't have those strong relationships. A few more minutes. I want to share the last two. Thanks. I love seeing your comments in the chat. For me, I think that this is so, so, so important. It's great to have relationships. It's great to have students feel like they're cared about, but we also have to believe in them, believe in their capabilities, believe that they can achieve. And so often we are hardwired to stereotype. We have biases, right? That we just because we are human. But if we really shift our mindset to everyone is capable of learning and contributing in meaningful ways, it might not all be at the same level. It might not all be the same thing. But I think we need to think about really attending to this mindset and what's possible when we do. So I want to share some of the research that I highlighted in this chapter. From Dr. Rosenthal. He was a researcher from Harvard, and he came into a classroom and was doing a research study and told these teachers, we have a test that can tell which one of your students are the most capable and will have the best achievement gains. And so they told these teachers that, and they said, we're going to tell you who these kids are, and we're going to see what happens at the end of the year. Well, of course, they were making up the group of students that they said were the most capable. They told them which students and then said, we'll come back at the end of the year and test their achievement. Well, turns out these students who they said, who were randomly assigned, but they said we're going to achieve more, they did achieve more, but it wasn't because they were preconceived to be more gifted. It was because the teachers had seen them as gifted. They believed it. They were told that. They treated them as if they were smart and capable, and the students showed up that way. So this, Pygmalion effect, this cycle, however you want to see it, our beliefs in students matter because they shape our actions, right? When we believe something, it shapes how we act. Those beliefs influence students, and then it starts to influence how they act, right? And then it shifts their outcomes for better or worse. Every day, our interactions, how we talk to people, what we believe influence our actions, and it influences their beliefs about themselves. And that's a heavy load, right? As a teacher to feel that, or as an educator, but it's a heavy responsibility. It is, right? It's what Spider-Man say, with great responsibility comes great reward. So knowing that we have this opportunity, but we have this influence because kids trust us, they believe in us, and they know when we believe in them. So it is great to connect, but we also need to make sure that we are really thinking about and just attending to our beliefs. So often, thank you, Ben, fixed it for me. I'm not a quote person. So we so our beliefs, but just when we're thinking about, too often I hear people say, oh, these kids can't do it, they're not capable, their parents don't care, they don't even do their homework, right? We make these generalizations without really understanding what's coming behind it. So very, very important to believe in students. And then the last one is redefining success. And if we continue to believe that success is simply standardized test scores or a 4.7 GPA, I think we are sorely missing the mark, right? We need to think about and backwards design from a much more holistic view of learners and the skills that we want people to have, and not just to do well in school, but to excel and to enjoy life. So Todd Rose, one of my favorites, talks about these collective illusions, right? And so I think it's just so important to highlight, because we get so fixated on what we think success means to other people. And I hear this all the time. Well, the parents want us to do that. The teachers want us to do that. My principal wants me to do that. Instead of coming together and say, gosh, what do we collectively want? So he says 97%, this is in his book, Collective Illusions, 90% of people personally consider success to be a matter of having meaning and purpose in their lives. I would say that too, right? This is what people say. At the same time, those same people thought 92% thought that other people define success in terms of career, money, and fame. Think about that for a minute. I personally believe that success is about joy and meaning in life. Yet I think that everyone else thinks about something different. So we're not actually talking about what success is. We're operating on a belief about what we think other people say. I think this happens in schools all the time. I personally believe success is that my students are happy and joyful and creative and having fun. But I think everyone around me thinks it's about how well they do on their spelling test, if they have the perfect capitalization in a paper, or if they get a 4.0, which now is like what a 5.0 is actually good. So we have to think about and really talk about, what does success mean? I personally, this is what I shared in the book, think that yes, expertise matters. We need to have expertise and we need to continue to grow it. But I also want people to have identity and belonging and feel like they matter, purpose, a sense of purpose in life and what they do, and to have well-being. So a broader view of success, I encourage you to think about, what does that actually mean? And then based on that, I keep coming back to this chart because it tends to be so powerful. We have to change our questions. We have to change the way we talk about success. So if we think success means doing well on a test, then we should ask, how'd you do on your test? But if we think success is about solving problems and being a good person and getting better each day, we have to ask different questions, because our young people are going to start to understand, even if I say, I don't care if you get straight A's, if I only ask how you done on your test and what your grades are, they're going to believe what I asked them. This happened with my daughter just recently. She was like, Mom, why do you keep asking me about my grades? I'm like, because that's the data I have. And I'm trying to understand how you're doing and what's working and how you're feeling and how you're managing all this stress. She goes, well, why don't you just ask me that? And I was like, oh, very good point. Right. And so when I did ask, hey, were you funny today? What happened today? Then she opened up and started sharing all of these great stories. And so again, I keep coming back to this, is like really attending to the questions we're asking and how it really conveys what we care about to those in our care. And if you have better questions to ask, please send them my way, because I'm constantly in need of better questions to ask. So that was a rapid view of those 4 chapters and some of the key themes and ideas. And I want you to think about, we're going to put you in some breakout rooms just to have some conversations. And I hope that you don't feel the pressure. I hope that this is just an opportunity to process some of the things you're thinking. But there's these 3 questions, and I want you to think about, how might you help your learners and or colleagues understand their strengths or opportunities for growth? Why does connection and belonging matter? And what does success mean to you? Those are 3 questions to think about, whichever one is interesting to your group to talk about. Or if you have other questions, please answer those. We're going to spend probably about 15 minutes in some breakout rooms and then come back and close up and share some golden nuggets. And then we're going to continue to use on social media, continue this week to just share thoughts and questions and ideas based on these questions.